Hey everyone, Sari here, and welcome back to another week of Dark Season defense matches. After a successful debut in the previous season, I wanted to give the defense another week of matches before making any adjustments. Garnef was a particularly fun experiment to see working out well. His game refine can make him very hard to handle cleanly thanks to its sweep effect, while the Unity and Lull make sure that he has plenty of firepower available. Guinevere's a great second threat to pair with him. Garnef doesn't handle mages too well, but Gwyn can demolish any of them that come her way. Her build is similar to Garnef's and fully protects her from stray panic effects that might exploit the buffs she gets from Medeus. The 2 times pulses work with Azura's infantry pulse to set both icebergs to 1 charge. Together with Catria's triangle attack support and Medeus's infantry rush, it lets both mages fire a near-guaranteed iceberg in their first round of combat. Idun's a great far-safe bodyguard. Hardy Fighter works really well with her built-in follow-up denial, and using Sacred Cowl over Aegis lets her recharge the special without relying on a Breath Seal, which lets her use Deflect Magic instead to help survive Geocorans. Catria ties the setup together, enabling Guinevere and Garnef to mostly cover the same threat ranges, while giving the entire team a major boost to firepower. Azura is a solid enough dancer for the team. While she is a bit vulnerable to getting isolated by Milla, the pulse she offers the mages is invaluable, and her sudden panic can force the offense team into some awkward positions on the map. Like last Dark Week, Bremen's mostly a backup threat here. Getting them into the first rounds of combat is tricky to do while also balancing the areas of Catria, Medeus, and Idun's skills, and I'm still thinking of ways to manage it. I did make a couple of adjustments to the structure layout throughout the week, trying to make it a bit harder to engage safely on the first turn, and also to take advantage of the top right corner. The defense had another fairly successful week overall, only suffering a few clean losses along the way. It's good to keep seeing results like this, and I'm pretty happy with how the defense is holding up. So let's get to the first match. This match was an interesting way to start off the week. It's been quite a while since I've seen a Halloween Sithis on a team, and backing her up with mouph is a really neat way to let her secure one-shots with Sirius and sort of play into the Ashe setup that I like to use during her bonus week, where she ends up healing quite a bit extra thanks to that bonus true damage. It's a neat team, and the damage reduction she can get from Flame is a nice way to help her survive, while they also have a Henriette to help keep them safe against any ranged threats that would really put a dent in Sothis. Probably mostly archers. They take a couple of turns to set up here, just clearing out the structures and getting back out of range as they do. And once they've cleaned out the corner, they get ready to move in. While the bolt tower doesn't actually do any damage to us, it's still pretty easy for Ashe to move in and take Azura down.
Do try to understand.
Then they move Sothis and mouph in, and take down Garnef before he gets a chance to use his weapon.
Your candy will be ours.
Yep. And I think they were expecting to be able to handle this from here, but Catria does have a triangle attack available, and
I do.
that does a lot of work into a blue melee opponent. And from there, well, Guinevere can flatten Ashe without any issues.
I have steeled my heart. Such disgrace.
And then Bremen can get rallied forward to knock out mouph.
I won't lose. Absurd.
And losing half their team is enough for them to surrender the match and move on. This match was an interesting second one to see. They've got a pretty impressive Chrom here who's very nearly maxed out. I think they're just waiting for the double special hero rerun to get the last couple of marches for him. And they've also got the rest of their team set up for a variety of pre-charged specials, including Chrom's Deadeye, the Bonfire for Ashe, and a Blazing Wind for Yuri. It's really strong at just picking off targets and moving in, or hitting and running thanks to the extra mobility they have from Change Fate and Foul Play. And with Loki helping everything out with potentially stall and gravity effects, they have a lot of ways to just move in here.
Think of the plan.
They get things going right away.
A token of our thanks.
Chrom just getting to Deadeye Idun right away here means that she doesn't really have a chance to survive that. But they don't really retreat far enough, which means Guinevere can step in and one-shot Yuri. I think they forgot that they'd already used Kanto for Yuri, but he wouldn't have been able to use it anyway thanks to Medeus. They decide to keep going here and just retreat out of range for the turn, and try to bait Garneth out with Milla. Which works, but Garneth can actually take Milla out, which might not have been what they were expecting. Sadly, Bram can't quite get in range for this turn, which makes them a pretty easy target for Ashe to move in and take down.
Please forgive me.
And then after opening things up a little bit, they can have Chrom move in and take down Garneth. Though Garneth does get a pretty solid counter swing in here.
A token of our thanks.
And then Katria gets to move in and, after a dance, take down Loki.
No more.
Even after the third knockout, they decide to keep pushing through for the win, and from here it's not so hard to clean things up. Ashe and Chrom can finish off Katria and Azura with a dance.
Be careful. Will this do?
And without Azura to dance them, the team doesn't really have as much of an option for getting into range. So, it's pretty easy from here. They might have forgotten that Chrom can't actually keep charging the specials after the fourth turn, but Ashe can still punch through Medeus here. The Bonfire does quite a lot.
Lord Asker.
And then after Chrom gets his Unity effect online, he can snipe Gwyn and close things out. This match was a bit unfortunate to see, especially right after the last one, and it was the match that finally got me to start tweaking with the structure layout to try and improve things without changing too much. The combination of Micaiah and Leon is actually really neat and offers a lot of ways to approach enemy ranged threats. Leon with Triangle Adept is especially useful, especially against any red threats like a Duo Chrom, or colorless ones like Bramwind. while Makai is just really great at flattening any armors she runs into, and can be really useful for hitting and running, especially combined with Peony and Ash, and Dogger too. And Altina's just always great as a sweeper, especially if you can take out the duo's hindrance before she needs to vantage anything. They take a couple of turns setting up here and clearing out this corner, and they don't destroy all of the structures, which means that when Leon plonks himself right in there, the only units that can actually reach him, potentially, are Garneth and Bramwind, neither of whom have a good time attacking into a triangle adept mage with color advantage. Nobody else can get in range here, and with everybody out of range of Idun's saves, it's very easy for Micaiah to just move in and pick off Medeus. They continue backing up here and move Leon down one tile, which lets him bait this Bramwind. Even the Bramwind does get triangle attacks online, the color advantage and triangle adept are a bit too much to punch through.
I won't lose.
Especially when Leon gets to counter with an iceberg and stop Bram from being able to get those quads.
I am a prince.
Sadly, Guinevere doesn't quite manage to get her triangle attacks online, which means she doesn't have enough firepower to take down Altina,
A blessing from the gods.
before Altina gets to Twin Blades her down. And from there, Katri is a very easy pickup for Altina. And they can just reposition Ash forwards and let her enemy phase Azure and Idun. Idun can do some damage here and shut down the auto follow-up thanks to Hardy Fighter, but she can't actually survive the bonfire on the counter,
Please forgive me.
and Azure is not going to threaten Ash at all. And overall, it was a
Consider it done.
pretty clean clear. This match was an interesting one to rebound with. They brought along a Deflect Magic Hector, and while he's not using a Hardy Fighter with Aegis to pair with that, Deflect Magic alone is still enough for him to shrug off a lot of the triangle attack threats he runs into. And backing him up with a Ninja Korin and both Harmonic Azure and Duo Sigurd give them a lot of options for just hidden running to pick off anything that might actually cause Hector problems before it gets a chance to attack him. While Hector himself shouldn't really have an issue keeping Korin and the rest of his team safe once they've finished wreaking havoc. They spend the first turn here just clearing out structures and working their way towards that duo's hindrance. And end up not actually taking advantage of it after all.
To shreds.
After a couple of dances, they sent Korin in to attack Idun, but it's a little hard for Korin to actually finish Idun off. And after using both dances, and with the duo's hindrance still in line, they can only just dance Korin with Peony and then pull back out of range. Unfortunately, Hector being in that corner at the start of the turn means he doesn't have any way to actually protect his allies during this enemy phase,
We've been detected.
which means Guinevere gets a very easy knockout on Korin. And then Garneth gets danced and takes down their Sigurd. Even with 50% damage reduction, he's not having a good time here.
You are my one true
And then Medeus can jump in and take down Azura.
I can sing no more.
And with half their team knocked out, that's enough for them to concede and move on. This was another interesting match to see. It's the first time I've actually seen a fallen Lilith on an offense team, and I do think she's a fantastic support. She's enabling so many units with the ability to give them null follow-up from any distance as long as she starts the turn nearby. And here they're pairing her up with a Duo Corrin, which neutralizes the drawbacks of Wind Sweep and gives Corrin a much easier time actually securing quads to knock out units that might normally be tricky for her to handle. They get started on the first turn here, which lets them take advantage of their safety fence. And while Idun does get to survive the first two hits, if you can't finish Corrin off in one hit on the counterattack, and not even a Sacred Cowl getting recharged is enough to survive this next hit. And then they can move Lilith in to break the catapult and make sure they keep that safety fence alive for this turn. And since we can't chase them, it's very easy for them to start doubling in and closing out the match from here. They take out Catria first, which opens up the duo's hindrance, and also means that Medeus doesn't shut their Canto control down, which is a fun extra perk of using all of Corrin's movement there. They don't decide to actually go any further in here, and just pull out of range to draw us out. Sadly, Brem doesn't quite catch up, and nobody else can actually get in range here, so it's pretty easy for them to just start tearing apart the rest of the team. Brem nearly survives those two hits from Corrin, which was pretty fun to see. I have started considering giving them something other than Sturdy Impact to work with, since making them a little harder to handle in the enemy phase would actually help a lot in a lot of these replays. There's no follow-up, just does so much for Corrin here. Yeah, and Luna's just enough to let her punch through Garneth. And all the extra dances are enough for her to really just clean out the rest of this match. Although they do have Freya Wings in to help clean things up. And with a Gale Force, it's easy enough for her to step in and take down Guinevere. This match was a bit of an oddball. It's very rare to actually see a 5-unit offense team anymore, now that we have Ashe available as a free enabler for the Light Season and Reagan for Astra. But maybe they foddered their Ashe off without realizing that she'd be useful, or they're just deliberately using a 5-unit team. I do think this is still a pretty solid team that can handle a lot of things defenses throw at them. The combination of Chrom and Edelgard give them a lot of flexibility with approaching things, and sniping any units that might give Edelgard problems while letting her clean things up. They don't end up trying to snipe anything here. Chrom would probably have a hard time handling Idun after Sacred Cowl gets charged. And they just plonk Edelgard in front of the team and try to let her tank. It doesn't end as well as she might like. While she does get the damage reduction on the first hit here, Garneth actually out-attacks her, and that iceberg is a little too much for her to handle. And while the rest of the team can't quite get in range, losing Edelgard is enough for them to surrender and move on. This match was a really fun one to see. It's not too often that you end up seeing a maxed out Surtur anymore. I'm not sure when he'll get his refine. I'm hoping he does get one eventually. And this equally maxed out Henriette is just really impressive. 63 visible res is a lot, and I imagine she has no problems tanking her way through just about anything she runs into. The two of them together seem like a really effective save pair, and even though Surtur's weapon isn't necessarily as good as some other options, I think they still work pretty well here. The Fafnir is also a really fun idea since he's a good way to open things up for them, especially with Disarm Trap, and potentially pick off any targets that might give them problems before things get started. And the extra Dissonant Guard support is very useful for Henriette, especially combined with Peony and her Distant Guards, and the extra Spur Def Res from Air. Even with all of that support though, it's not going to save Henriette from a
Forgive me.
triangle advantage Guinevere.
I'm so sorry, Sharena.
And things just start snowballing down from there. Azura dances Gwyn, and Garnet can jump forward to take down Fafnir.
How reckless. I've been made a fool.
And then Gwyn can move in and wipe out Peony.
Ha! Time to sleep.
We don't actually get in range for the rest of their team, but losing those three is enough for them to surrender and move on. This team wasn't quite as impressive as the last one, but they did still bring along an interesting collection of units. The strictly base kit Yuri is a little unfortunate to see. Not even giving him a Beast Slaughter seal is odd, I think, but he can still do his job of helping the team maneuver around the map and potentially picking off a target before things get going. And together with Erica, they make a very effective hit and run team, thanks to just the extra cantos they have available. Although they do need to be careful since Medeus can shut that down pretty quickly. Or just a heavy trap if they roll the dice on it and guess incorrectly. They don't actually have Fjorm in position to help save Erica, and it wouldn't have done much since Idun can just move in and triangle attack her down.
Am I not strong enough?
From there, the team doesn't actually do a good job of getting in range, but that's enough for them to surrender and move on. This match was another full save ball with an Idun and a Valentine's Robin, who I haven't seen as much of as I actually kind of expected to after her release. I think she got very overshadowed by Chrom, but I do think she's a little overlooked as a far save option. Her defenses are extremely solid, and being a colorless mage with a preferred weapon, the only one we have as an armored unit, is a very powerful niche to have. And backing them up with Flane and Hilda at the same time gives them a lot of support options and healing to sustain their way through an enemy onslaught over the course of some turns. The extra damage reduction Flane gives them too is really valuable and helps them tank their way through things that might normally be a little too much, including Catria balls. And while I haven't actually gotten to see it used in a very long time, Hilda's ability to isolate multiple targets can absolutely cripple a defense team if they can snipe that Deus hindrance. I honestly expected Robin to get taken down by Guinevere here, but
Darkness consumes
Garnef decided it's his turn to shine,
So much left to say.
and takes her down with an iceberg. Guinevere gets to move in after that, and takes down Hilda.
We came all this way.
And then after Idun moves into rally, Medeus gets to take a shot at Idun. Although he can't really take her down, she's a little bit chunky. She doesn't get a chance to actually counterattack him here though, thanks to Medeus turning her counterattacks offline at the start of the turn, and that's enough for them to surrender the match and move on. This match was an interesting one to see. It's been a very long time since I've seen a legendary Celica on an offense team, and the Ascended attack and speed assets are really good for her. I'm planning to give my Niflord at some point too, and finish giving her Dragon Flowers, but it's probably going to be closer to her eventual refine and remix. The bonus week Eitri is also a very powerful threat, although putting her with Celica does lean their damage into very heavily green mage, so it can give them some problems if they run into a particularly stubborn red that neither of them can deal with. They take a turn just clearing structures out here and getting information to get going. Medeus's Canto control does a lot for making Eitri's life harder at least, which is good to see. I'm not sure if I'll end up keeping Medeus on the team, even though every time I see him neutralize a Bolt Tower like this is very satisfying. Part of the problem is just that he doesn't also shut down warp effects, and with some of the new additions to the skill pool and unit pool recently, I do think that warp bubble effect is extremely important to have on the team. They go in here, and Eitri spends a couple of rounds of attacks just trying to bring down Idun. And eventually she can manage it.
Let's try this.
But it takes them 3 attacks to actually manage this, and at that point it's very hard for them to try to retreat out of range of the team for this coming turn. While they do get just barely out of that range, it's not going to help too much when the triangle attack formation buff lets Garnef jump in and knock out Celica.
I'm sorry.
Nobody else manages to get in range here, unfortunately, and they do decide to keep going. Eitri doesn't have too many issues now that Idun is out of the picture and can take down Catria without any problems. And then the dances let her take down Medeus. Eventually. Having 3 dancers does a lot, honestly. And spending those 4 rounds of combat does let her charge up the Dragon Fang, but they decide to just let Ashe go in and handle Garnef instead. The charged up Iceberg might have been a little too much for Eitri to handle, especially with the almost half of her health remaining. Unfortunately, Ashe is a little too far forward at this point, and Bram can get danced in and take her down.
Such disgrace.
Gwyn can't get in range here, and that means that she's a pretty easy target for the pre-charged Dragon Fang from Eitri.
Try this.
And then she gets danced and goes after Bramond as well. I don't think they realized that Brem had a moonbow ready to go,
Meet your defeat.
and they might have made this attack without looking at the combat previews, since
What a pain.
Brem does just barely get to finish her off with that counterattack. Sadly, Brem doesn't quite have enough health to survive the Plumeria here, which means that we're down to just Azura at the end of this. They don't have a very easy way to handle Azura anymore though, especially with Inigo out of range for that combat, and dancers can't dance each other, which is actually a problem for them here, since Peony and Plumeria can't really do very much damage to Azura, and while Inigo can, he only gets to take one shot at her. And the damage just isn't quite enough to finish her off before the 7th turn is done. This match was another extended one, with a half save ball featuring Fallen Edelgard and a bonus week Fallen Rhea. I do think Rhea is actually an extremely powerful save tank, either as a melee specialist or actually as a far save unit too. She can actually end up sacrificing her preferred Dragonwell skill to run Vantage instead and secure one-shots on a lot of ranged units, or melee as well, depending on her support and build. I was actually hoping to use her during her bonus week myself, but it didn't quite work out. There were just too many other options to be using. Fury is a fun way to help them navigate this map and really improve the mobility of these armors, especially combined with Ash. Even if Kanto Control does clamp down on his skating a little bit. They spend the first few turns here just clearing out structures and waiting out Medeus's start of turn flash effect. And once they've gotten through that, they smite Edelgard in, plant Freya behind her to keep her safe from melee, and let her go in on the ranged. It doesn't really work as well as they might like. Even when they wait out that start of turn effect, Garneth still sweeps Edelgard pretty easily and actually doesn't need it since he knocks her out with the triangle attack. They do decide to keep going here. Yuri goes into Medeus and
Step aside.
can't actually knock him out on this first combat. But he does drop Medeus low enough that Ash can move in and finish the job.
Burn in the pits of hell.
It does get a little bit close with that iceberg, but Ash's bonus week stats are enough for her to make it through that. And then they can dance Yuri and have him go after Brem, and
Better accept it.
it's a shame Idun made it out of range to protect people from that, but they have Rhea warp in and attack Guinevere here, and she does get to do a lot of true damage based on Gwyn's res, but it's not quite enough to finish Guinevere off, and pre-charging that iceberg ends up being a bit of a bad idea for them.
Forgive me.
Then Garneth can just step over and take down Yuri.
Just my luck.
And, well, unfortunately, the isolation from Mela means Azura doesn't get to dance Guinevere here. So Ash gets to finish her off without any problems. And then they can use aerobatics to have her warp in and take down Azura as well. Unfortunately for Ash, she doesn't have any way to sustain here, and 12 hit points is not a lot to work with. especially when she's staring down a Garneth with a pre-charged iceberg.
I am undying.
Such disgrace.
Idun ends up a bit stranded here, since Ketra's reposition just pulls Medeus way away.
I've got my eye out.
And once she's all on her own like this, she actually doesn't have a weapon effect online anymore. So if they can knock her out with Peony,
Happy New Year.
almost. Sacred Cowl does a lot. But Peony does get Idun low enough to actually finish off with Milla, and that just leaves Karnif and Katria to work with. The Dio Dance from Peony means that they can actually move in and finish Katria off, with a little help from Milla. But unfortunately for them, they're out of dances, and that's the end of their 8th turn. This match was a bit of an unfortunate way to close out the week, although it is fun to see a legendary Edelgard. I haven't seen her on defenses very much in a long time now, and I'm looking forward to having an excuse to put her back on an offense team myself. There may be some shenanigans planned with Summer Edelgard. This is a very Gale Force heavy team, and honestly just has a lot of options for breaking through an enemy team. Between Corrin for a ranged threat and the Dio Dances from Corrin and Peony both, and the extra Raging Storm from Edelgard, they have enough actions to just clean out just about anything they run into as long as someone can find a way in. They spent the first several turns here just clearing out structures and getting in position. Breaking the Dio's hindrance is pretty important since it means that Corrin and Peony both have access to their Dio skills without having to worry about knocking Katria out first. They do spend some time figuring things out after that, though. I think they might have been a little intimidated by Idun here, since Corrin can't actually knock her out in one round of combat. And that does slow things down quite a bit for any Gale Force team. Eventually, though, they decide to pull the trigger and I guess realize that even if Corrin can't knock Idun out in one hit, Idun can't knock her out in one round of combat either. And when they've got this many extra dances to work with, it's not so bad to just use 2 to make sure Idun gets taken down.
Corrin's the coolest. Time to land the final blow.
And with Idun out of the way, they can dance Corrin and take down Azura. And without the dancer on the field, it's a lot easier for them to just stay out of range. So they use their second Dio Dance, pull Peony out of the way, and wait. Sadly, the repositions and drawbacks don't really work in our favor here, and means that even with the extra movement options that Katria offers, the team can't catch anybody. And now that the team's moved a little bit out of position, and also doesn't have Idun guarding them, it's very easy for Corrin to just start picking them off one by one.
Divine punishment. Corrin's the coolest.
Then Tyburn can just reposition Nadelgard in, and oh, that's some Raging Storms going. She doesn't get this second Gale Force since she's not using Quickened Pulse, but sadly, the Tactics room means that Bramland can't reach anything other than Nadelgard here. And the follow-up denial is enough to make sure she survives, and gets to move in to finish them off on the next turn. Overall, I think the defense held up pretty well this week. It's a bit unfortunate to see the heavily player-faced strategies doing so well against it, but I think that's partly just because the threat range of the team is fairly limited, especially before the map gets moving, and I might end up shuffling the roster around to adjust and try to improve that a bit. I am also planning to post a channel update video in the next couple of days, just to go over some of the content I'm planning to post in the next couple of months, so keep an eye out for that. I do have a Discord channel as well if you'd like to hang out or get updates on videos and schedules. There's a link in the description, and I've also got a Patreon link there too if you'd like to help support the channel. As always, I hope you've enjoyed the video, good luck with your own matches, and I'll see you next time.